Well, hello there, beautiful. Welcome to a brand new Let's Clay video. In this video, I will be showing you the process that I went through in making a wall-mounted piece of art using this wooden frame I got from Faultine Art Space. I'll leave a link in the basement for you. And here I've added this old dragon head that I've had for quite some time that I've just not known what to do with, and so I decided to make it into a wall-mounted piece. So here I've sketched out some of the details that I'm going to be doing around the dragon. You can see I decided to go very floral and you know, lots of droppy looking things. And I decided to put some Celtic knots around the outside edge because I've got this beautiful exposed frame that I can decorate as well. So I've got my liquid clay. I decided to do the knots in the gold clay. And for this one, I ended up rolling out these snakes by hand, which was a bit difficult. It was a little tedious and hard to keep them uniform. So I ended up treating myself to a little clay extruder tool if I ever decide to do this again, and so that I can have really nice uniform ropes for making coils and things. So I'm excited to start playing with that. You'll probably see it come up in a future video. So my first attempt here, my first technique that I decided to try was just setting down the liquid clay in short little lines and attaching the rope and cutting it where it would go under the other two. So, you know, with the weave, it's going to go under one, over one, under one. So the over is what I'm laying down, and then I'm cutting it at each of the under intersections. So actually, even though it will create the visual illusion of being a solid piece, this first side was made by just creating a series of smaller lengths that were touching each other and connected up just right against the edges to create that illusion of them going under and over each other without adding too much height or bulk. So I just continue to add the clay. You can see I've got my nice long line, but I'm going to cut it short. On this first end, I was still doing these individual little short segments. As I moved around the other three sides, my technique got a little bit better with more practice and more experience, trial and error, which is often the case with these sorts of experimental pieces for me. And so it's actually kind of fun. This piece has a bit of a record of my figuring out how to do clay Celtic knots. The first side has some charming eccentricity to it that subsequent sides got a little bit cleaner and smoother. I got a little bit more efficient at doing the knots. I figured out some ways to make them go a little bit more easy. If there's interest, maybe at some point I could do just a straight up tutorial on how to do knots on a flat surface with the polymer clay, because I did figure out a few things that made it go a little bit easier, made it easier, look a little bit cleaner and more uniform. So I just continued along here in my dauntless task of attaching these piece by piece. And you can see at the beginning here my ropes are very thin. They're very, very thin. I thought that it would help make it look, I wanted it to look a little more delicate. I didn't want it to take up the entire, I didn't want all of them to be touching each other at every single point along the way. I really wanted that lattice work to show through. But you can see here, when I completed it, it was a little uneven, and so I ended up adding a groove between them to even them out a bit. Which did end up making them much thicker, but then that groove became the real visual line. And so I liked it because it also, it looks a bit more like some of the drawn Celtic knots where they really, they draw it to look very dimensional as if they are knotted out of rope. And so I thought it added some nice visual interest, and it also solved my, my irregular clay problem. But you can see here on the second side, I decided to roll my snakes out just a little bit thicker, which gave me a little bit more freedom to put that groove in, and I didn't have to push down quite so hard. It was also a little bit easier for me to control the thickness. You can also see that I started doing a different technique where I laid out longer lengths and then used the pointed end. I have a sharp end on that metal sculpting tool, um, which allows me to put sharp indents so I could push down and separate the rope where another would cross over. So I completed all of those. I baked each side before I continued on to the next. And when all 4 of those were completed, I continued on to the top. So initially my design was to do very bright colors corresponding with some of the bright colors on the dragon, particularly down her nose. So you can see I started with the teal blue, I added some gold, and then I also added some of the purple. Then I started layering some of the colors over each other just for a little bit more depth and visual interest. But then I got a new camera. Isn't that beautiful? I am so excited to make new videos for you using this new camera. I also decided that the colors were distracting a little bit too much from the dragon, and so I decided to color over them. I painted over them with this Swelligant metal coating that I got from Christy Friesen. I'll put a link for that in the basement as well for you. And you can see Me From the Past is very helpfully showing you where I use some of these different colors. I used the brass, the bronze, and the iron, and I really like the way that it brings out a lot of the detail on the dragon's face. It really makes the gold in her eyes glow. It makes the gold on her snout and her little sparkle details on her nose really pop. But I also was feeling like I was missing some of the details. Oh, there we go. Look at those nice knots. That's the best side. I decided. Me From the Past thought you deserved to see the nicest, the 4th of 4 that I did with those knots. But then I also decided that I was really missing some of the color from the previous incarnation, and so I decided to add a little bit of that color back in. So here it is, the completed piece. I'm really happy with her. I really love the way she came out. I hope that you enjoyed watching this. It was a lot of fun to make and a lot of fun to share with you. And that just about wraps it up for this episode, with just enough time left for me to say, ciao for now.